Yep, I need that one. Good afternoon, everyone. We're Team 14, and we're presenting to you our solution, Walk This Way. So our challenge was to propose a solution to reduce the number of type 2 diabetics to the level of 2010 by 2025. And the way that we propose to do this is to increase the number of teenagers walking to and from school. And the initial target area for our intervention, we've picked Chicago in the US. And the reason that we've chosen this for the initial rollout of the program is that Chicago actually has very high levels of childhood obesity. But because it's an urban area, we've worked out that a lot of the children within Chicago live close to the schools, so they should be able to walk to school. And the reason that we think that this will work, this idea of getting more children to walk to school, is that we found these figures that show the way that children travel to school now compared to 40 years ago. And you can see that there's been a massive increase in the number of people that are being driven to school and a massive decrease in the number that are walking or biking to school. So what we aim to do in our proposed solution is to build on these safe route maps. So these have been trialed in a couple of elementary schools in the US, but in order to make them more in tune with the teenage adolescent population that we'd be targeting, we aim to digitize these maps into an interactive app. So you would have an app that shows you the route that you need to walk to school. And also, just to make this even more attractive to the teenagers, as well as it being an interactive map, you would use the app to log the number of miles that you've walked. So the app would keep track on how many miles you'd walked over the course of a month. And then at the end would tell you like how many calories you'd burned, and it would also compare it to a known distance that the teenagers would be familiar with. So between two known, well-known areas in Chicago. So it'd really give them an idea of the large amount of a distance that they can cover just by doing a small amount of exercise every day. And to make it even more attractive to the teenagers, there would be an annual competition between the high schools in the district. So you would have the high schools competing, so there may be different teams within the high schools, but at the end of every term you would see a scoreboard between the high schools, and then the winning high school at the end of the year would get money to spend on sports equipment or computing equipment, so the students would benefit from uptake of exercise. And finally, because among teenagers at the moment, video bloggers or vloggers, if you don't know the correct teenage terminology, are very popular, we would enlist some of the vloggers. This is Zoella, she's very popular. We would enlist vloggers like Zoella to record some video messages which would flash up on the app and really encourage the teenagers to get on board with this idea. Okay.
Okay, so before we talk about how this intervention will improve the quality of adolescents' life, or quality of population life, we wanted to do a bit of a quantification of the impact of this intervention. So we did some kind of rough modeling on how this intervention may impact diabetes prevalence in a specific population, which is the 18 to 45, which is what the adolescents would move into. So we used US census data and current incidence rates of diabetes prevalence to model the increase. So that's the blue line, and the absolute numbers you see on the left. And the triangles are just the percentages, so on the right. And so we used published data to calculate population preventable fraction, and we modeled the uptake from 20% to 100% across the US, which is the other lines that you see. So this will be, the highest line will be 20% uptake in the US, and 100% will be down here. And then here you see the sort of the percentages. So even though this is quite a simple population, we see still somewhat of a decrease in the diabetes prevalence, and in absolute numbers this is quite high, and it's about 5 times higher for obesity. And this, of course, doesn't take into account any spillover effect, like we heard yesterday. For example, parents may uptake more exercise, or school personnel may take up more exercise based on this intervention in the adolescents. And as we heard yesterday, obesity, of course, is related to a lot of physical and social consequences like bullying and cognitive consequences. Of course, that will improve when we decrease both obesity and diabetes in this target population. So why is it easy and intuitive? Well, we're dealing with a very tech-savvy population. This is the generation that has grown up on smartphones and on social media. So it's going to be very easy for them to take it up and use, because it's just a map on your phone. And importantly, it won't take time out of the school days because we know teenagers have pretty packed school days, especially in the US. And so in terms of cost effectiveness, so we ran a few numbers. So the app development will be a one-time cost, so that can be then used across all the schools in the US. And safety equipment and incidentals will be things like marketing equipment, vests for volunteers. So we calculate that to be about $25,000 per year per school district. And prices for the sport and computer equipment will be about $5,000 per year per school district. And using the numbers we calculated in the graph before, the cost to treat all these new diabetic patients would have been sort of more up to $13 billion. So even if every single school district and about 13,000 in the US took up this intervention, the cost of that will still be just a third of what it would be costing to treat these diabetes and patients for society. So we didn't see any sort of ethical or legal barriers to this implementation because this is based on already existing infrastructures. But there might be some safety concerns. So for example, for parents who have driven their children to school might be very reluctant to let them go. So we'll add a possibility to GPS track your kids on the phone. And also in terms of urban development, we'll have a feature in the app that will allow the users to feedback problems. If there's a crosswalk that needs repairing, that will be possible to feedback in the app, and that will help improve urban infrastructure as well for other people to use. And there are grants within safety routes that allow you to apply for engineering funds to improve urban infrastructure. And we'll have volunteers with high visibility jacket in problem areas to assure safe routes to school. And finally, as someone mentioned, that there might be issues with stigmatizing individuals. So we're not singling out anyone to not, for example, be zero weight individuals. This is an implementation across the schools. The maps will still be available on paper, so if you don't have a smartphone, or if you're from a low socioeconomic group, you could still participate in the program. And why should we win? So this is a very easy, cost-effective, and impactful intervention that could lead to healthier lives and better schools. Thank you.